Hello, I am Sandra Lee, and this is Thursday Tips for Thriving. This is a weekly live that I do, and I'm going to talk for about half an hour about how I choose foods. If you have questions that you want to ask, you are welcome to post them. And if I can find the comments, then I will do my best to answer them. If you want to enter into StreamYard, then I will be able to see them there as well. So let me refresh my Facebook and see if I can see my live so that I can get any questions you have. So a lot of how I choose foods is just basic common sense, right? So there are lots of foods that I used to consume regularly that I now no longer consume. And I knew even when I was eating them that they weren't good for me, that they weren't beneficial to my health, and that they were not smart decisions to make, but I would do it anyway. And I don't know about you, but I think that's something that pretty much everybody does. I know that there are a few people who are so um, strict about the way they eat because that's what they have to do to maintain their health. That they don't do that. That they very limited in the leeway that they give themselves. But most people aren't like that. Most people want to eat what they want to eat. And for me, what I do is, for the most part, I keep my food within a certain set of standards. And then I allow myself little bits of other things that aren't necessarily quite up to that standard in my diet. That works for me and my health the way it is now. The people who I know who are more limited in that have health issues that basically require that they be more strict about the way they eat because it makes them sick. It makes them feel bad if they, go outside those boundaries. But I'm going to assume that most of the people who are going to watch this are going to be closer to the way I am, generally healthy and wanting to have healthier eating patterns, but still allow myself some things around the edges. You've heard of the 80-20 rule. If I do, down the road on the plan 80% of the time, I can leave myself some about 20% that I can fudge things a little bit. That's the way I do it. Now, I don't keep any kind of numbers, any kind of actual tracking of that. I just know that the majority of the food that I consume is down the road following these certain guidelines. And I allow myself to enjoy things that are on the edges. I wouldn't say it's even 20%, maybe closer to 15% of the things that are like treats just for enjoyment or not necessarily following what I consider the normal guidelines for the way I eat. My health enables me to do that. Now, that might not be true for everyone. You have to figure out what works for you, what has you feel the best, and which, whatever conditions, health conditions, issues that you may be dealing with, what helps you to manage those and keep your brain working well, like I talked about with Raina, yesterday, and keep your overall health the way you want, giving you the energy level that you want, keeping pain and those kinds of things managed. Diet is how you do that. So really depends on your specific situation, what works for you and what little fudges, things that you really enjoy that you can allow yourself to have. So the first criteria is stuff that is just plain junk that I know I don't care that much about and it's easy to avoid. When I go to a grocery store, almost all of my time is spent on the edges of the food store, where they have the produce, the vegetables, the meat, the whole foods that are that would spoil if they had them in other places in the store. So they just concentrate them around the edges. That's where I spend most of my time in the grocery store, buying whole foods. And if you are on my personal profile, you see that every day I post a picture of my food, and it's primarily something that I started with an onion or a carrot, a piece of meat, and prepare my food from that. Foods that don't have ingredient labels because it's just one thing. Or some foods that have a label, but there's very limited ingredients on it. So, canned tomatoes, for example. Tomatoes, maybe salt, maybe one preservative chemical on there. I don't have one here with me right now. But basically, foods that have one ingredient and maybe a little bit more so that they can keep it in the jar or the can until the consumer consumes it. Foods that have long lists of ingredients, lots of things that I can't pronounce, or me with my experience, I might know what they are. A lot of times I'm just going to choose not to eat them because I know that a lot of those things in there are not going to be good for me, not going to be good for my health. I have been educating myself about food and health and nutrition for decades. So I understand what a lot of those ingredients are, or if I don't know what they are, then I know what to suspect. What looks suspicious to me? That's something that I don't want to eat. Now, there are some things that might contain some of those ingredients, so a little bit longer ingredient list that I will still consume because I know that for the most part, my food is whole foods and that I am okay with a little bit of these other things out on the edges. Some people are really strict about it. One example is there are some people who are really strict about not consuming anything that has genetically modified ingredients in it, which means getting rid of all of the corn and the soy and the canola and the sugar beet, alfalfa. I'm not quite that strict. I almost completely exclude those. But if there's an ingredient on there, for example, soy, which is really common, um, used as an ingredient, it doesn't specify that it is GMO free. Sometimes I might still consume a little bit because it's a small part of my diet as opposed to a significant, right? So it's like soy and corn are such common ingredients. It's put in all kinds of packaged foods, all sorts of things. It's hidden in all these forms that you don't recognize are soy and corn. And if they do not specify that they are specifically either organic, certified organic, or non GMO, then chances are pretty good that those corn and soy ingredients are going to be genetically modified with all of the complications that go along with that. Not going to get into that now. That could be a topic for, an hour-long conversation at some future date. But I know from having educated myself about genetically modified foods that I want to do all that I can to avoid them, knowing that on occasion I'm going to allow myself a little bit. That is an area where I know some people who are like flat out refuse to eat anything that could have genetically modified foods in it. And a common place where that comes into play is going to a restaurant. Because in restaurants, there are ingredients over which I have no control, zero control. I might request something from, the people cooking the food, but that's just not something I put the effort and the energy into doing. I know that chances are really high that if there is an oil that is used in cooking some of the food, that it may well be canola oil. Or if there's something that is fried, it's likely going to have canola or soy or, some form of vegetable oil. And I just don't cut those out completely. I know a lot of people some people who do. But knowing that there are places like that where those sorts of ingredients are going to come in. There are other people who, are very careful about avoiding those kinds of vegetable oils in restaurants for other reasons than besides it's genetically modified, because there's other reasons for that. So it's like that is just an area where I personally do not choose to become a strict follower because it's just easier, less hassle. And I know that for the most part, my diet is free of those things. So, but avoiding genetically modified ingredients is, one of my criteria. When I am in a store and I have, eliminated most of the packages, but there are some things that I still like, I will read the labels. It's another really big piece of how I choose foods. If something has a label, I am going to read the ingredients. And there are foods that I will just look at, which means I'm interested in enough to look at it, and then I will put it back because of the ingredients. Happens all of the time. All of the time, which means I am looking at packaged foods often enough to consider consuming them, buying them. But that is one of my filters. Lists of ingredients, what they are, and genetically modified ingredients, avoiding genetically modified ingredients as best I can. Another factor is flavorings. So there are a lot of different flavorings on labels that are worth avoiding. So MSG is one of those ingredients, monosodium glutamate. And I learned how monosodium glutamate affects the brain and the nerves. And for me, that was enough reason to go beyond reasonable efforts to avoid this ingredient. It is hidden in so many different ingredients on those labels, and I have educated myself about how to identify those various forms of MSG. I'm not going to go into the scientific explanation about what happens when you consume it, but basically it's not good news. It kills your brain cells, kills your neurons. So you don't want that. You want to keep every neuron in your head working that you have still. So avoiding MSG is one of the things that I do to minimize that. Now, the truth is that I do still wind up probably eating a little bit of packaged food that contains a form of MSG, because one of the places where it is hidden is in something called natural flavors. Natural flavors. You would think that that means that it came from a plant. It's a combination of natural plant flavors. It's not. Natural flavors could be, I suppose, but usually it's a mixture of chemicals that is designed to make something taste delicious. Just reality of life. So when you are reading labels, one to suspect is natural flavors. Now, I was at a store the other day and buying chocolate, right? A chocolate product, because that's one of the ones that I still consume. We buy those and we have them small amounts, right? But chocolate. And it contains natural flavors. And yet I bought it anyway, knowing that this is a small part of my diet. So, depending on what the natural flavors are, my body's ability to manage that small level of consumption is going to be okay. At other times, I might have not chosen that product. But in this case, I decided to do it. So it's like that's the reality of what my shopping for food looks like. That there's places where it's like, we're going to follow the road, and then allowing little bits for enjoyment around the edges. I hope that helps. So, another aspect of how I choose foods, in addition to cutting things out wholesale and then reading labels and judging based on the labels, is looking for nutrient density. So, nutrient density is one of the things that I posted about in one of my blog posts, one of my Facebook posts a couple of days ago. So, what is nutrient density? Nutrient density is that there are a lot of nutrients that provide health, support for my body, its ability to heal itself and to function in concentrated amounts, as opposed to small little amounts of something. So, nutrient dense food is going to provide more valuable fuel, valuable nutrients, valuable supplies for healing and body function and brain function, lots of them. And then foods that have a lot of calories, a lot of flavor, a lot of volume, but not necessarily very many nutrients that provide tremendous value, those can be avoided or kept to a small amount. I used to be a vegetarian. For 10 years, I was vegetarian. I consumed ovo-lacto, so eggs and dairy, but other than that, no animal products. And I used to consume a lot of grain, a lot of grain. Also, side note, I also used to consume a lot of soy, one of those GMOs that I now avoid. But let's talk about grain. So, grain is a concentrated source of carbohydrates, but not a lot of other nutrients. There are some vitamins and minerals and things that are in some grains, not necessarily all grains, but so there's like a little bit more nutrient density in some grains than others. But overall, the nutrient density of grains is going to be low. So if I am filling my belly with a lot of carbohydrates, like I used to do, then I am not consuming as many foods that have other nutrient densities, more fats, more vitamins and minerals, quality proteins, antioxidants, nutrients, all of those nutrients that the body actually really needs to be healthy. So, understanding that the foods that are high in carbohydrates can be filling you up and having you feel satisfied without providing what your body actually needs to be healthy. Feel full. I used to make pasta. My own pasta. I used to make my own bread. Used to make cookies. So it's like there are all kinds of grain-based foods that I now don't eat. Now, I'm not saying that we personally completely cut out grains because we don't need to do that. For my husband and myself, our health is good enough that we have some grains. It's just not the majority of what we eat anymore, whereas it used to be. It used to be a significant proportion of my food would have come from these, I now understand to be empty carbohydrates. Not a lot of nutritional value. So now we consume a little bit of grain, but mostly everything else. So if you look at my pictures of daily food that are posted on my Facebook profile, you can see that sometimes there's rice noodles, sometimes there's rice, sometimes there's quinoa, but not every day and not in large amounts. Most of the food on my plate and in my bowls is going to be vegetables with a significant, you know, amount of meat. Not an overwhelming amount of meat, but in terms of nutrient density, the meat probably contains as many nutrients as all of the rest of the food combined. Because meat is a very nutrient dense food. Very nutrient dense. A lot of value is packed into that piece of meat. A lot of protein that's very valuable, fat soluble vitamins that are really important, all kinds of things that are in animal products. And again, I used to be vegetarian and not consume meat. I now understand that it is, though technically possible, to get all of the fat soluble vitamins that I need on a vegetarian diet. It's really difficult. It is difficult. So much easier to get them by consuming animal products because there are some nutrients that are not available in plants. They just aren't. Now, if you choose to be vegetarian, that is really up to you. It's a personal decision. But understanding that you might need to go to extra efforts to make sure that in particular you get fat soluble vitamins and the right kinds of fats. So omega-3 fatty acids are difficult to get from purely plant sources. And those omega-3 fats are really important for a lot of different things, including brain health, hormone health, all those, very important functions in the body. You want your brain to work and you want your hormones to be good. So it's so much easier to have that if you are getting the omega-3 fats. And you need to have enough cholesterol. Cholesterol is so important in the body. And yet, for decades, we have been brainwashed to believe that cholesterol and saturated fat are bad. They're not pushing that so hard now because now there's evidence that the cholesterol is actually good and they no longer have an upper limit to the amount of cholesterol that you consume. But there's still a lot of people out there who believe that fat is bad. Raina and I talked about that yesterday. So people are still recovering from what I consider to be brainwashing that we all received for decades and decades and decades. Even though for 30 years they have had the scientific evidence that says that cholesterol is not bad, that people still believe that cholesterol is bad. So cholesterol is so important that my body makes it every day. Cells all over my body are making cholesterol because I can't eat enough cholesterol to supply all of what my body needs. My body makes it. It is so important. Huge amount of the brain is cholesterol. Cholesterol is in the cell walls of every cell of the body. So important. So that is another aspect of how I choose foods. I choose foods knowing that I want to get more fat rather than less fat. Let me say that again. I choose foods to have more fat rather than less fat, with a focus on having it be quality fat. What makes quality fat? So you've heard of the heart healthy oils, the vegetable oils, the clear, see-through bottles of oil that you can go to the grocery store and see on the shelf. Those are like poison. I do not own any of those oils in my house. What oils do I have in my house? I have, fish oil, a supplement that we take, and I have coconut oil, which is a solid fat. I have butter, which is a solid fat. And I have olive oil, high quality olive oil, and that makes a difference. I'm not going to get too much into that today, but the quality of your oil makes a difference. And avocado oil. Those are the oils that I use to cook with, to, just put without heating, because oils can be damaged by heat. So recognizing that the quality of the oils that you buy matters. Olive oil is not something that I buy in a store. I order it from, I get Casandrino's olive oil. So I trust these suppliers to have sourced the product sustainably and to process it in a way that does not damage the oil. So understanding that the quality of the oils matters. What happens if you get vegetable oil, corn oil, soy oil, canola oil, cottonseed oil, margarine, all those? Those are made by taking seeds and pressing them and using chemical extraction to extract the oil. And then they use chemicals to remove the smelly parts and remove the contaminants and make it so it looks pretty and yellow. So it's chemicals that are used for all of that. And there's chemical, there's like reactions with a metal that are involved in, it's like, what a mess. And they have to make this nasty stuff taste good and smell all right. And so it's like that's a very industrially, chemically involved process that damages the oil. If there were any valuable nutrients in it to begin with, those nutrients are damaged by the heat, by the oxygen, by the light that oil has been exposed to, and by the chemical reactions and the solvents that are put in there. It's like yuck, awful stuff, terrible for your health. And we are told that it is heart healthy. That's because it's not saturated fat, not got cholesterol in it, but it's got all kinds of other garbage. So avoiding those nasty oils, a big part of how I choose foods. I choose foods for nutrient density and certainly for flavor, right? For enjoyment, for, what is I want to make today, all those kinds of things. So, but, understanding what to avoid and understanding what to add in, what you really want, nutrient density, getting all those vitamins and minerals into your body. How do you do that? That is a big part of how to choose foods that support health. Now, I understand that you might not be someone who is used to cooking everything from scratch. I totally get it. Start where you are. Make changes a little bit at a time. And as you do, every change you implement in how you eat gets you a little bit closer. I didn't start out eating the way I do now, making all of my food. It's been years. So you have time to make those changes gradually yourself and have your food be more nourishing, more supportive, better for your health. And it takes time. Just to understand, it takes time. And that is something that I commit to. because it's so important to me. Biofield Tuning, by the way, how foods feel, how the foods affect my energy and my ability to think, that is also part of how I make those decisions about what to eat. What does the energy of my food say? Right? So it's like it feels good. So when I want to have some chocolate in the evening, right? It's like it's okay because it's a small part of my diet. For the most part, it's good. You see my plates every day. So if this has been helpful for you, leave me a note. Look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for watching. Next week's special guest expert is Stacy Phillips with Travel the World of Healing. She's also a functional nutrition educator, so she understands about health and food and supporting people in overall health, even when they have issues and challenges to deal with. So I look forward to talking with you again. Thank you. Breathe.